Eredivisie. Ja, ja!
Daar is Klaassen, goal!
Hello to all the Dutch football fans across the world. It's Football-Oranje podcast 69. I'm Michael Statham with commentator Jonathan Beck today to discuss lots with the Eredivisie, answering your Twitter questions, a little bit on the Netherlands national team in terms of options for the March international games coming up. Storm Kira's ruined some of the fixtures this weekend, but we've still got lots to discuss. We're also going to be talking about our favourite Eredivisie talents this season. Plenty to enjoy. You're listening to us via SoundCloud, iTunes, YouTube or Football Nation Radio. Make sure to give us a like wherever you are and subscribe too. Enjoy. Jonathan, thank you very much for coming back to Football-Oranje yet again and offering your views on Dutch football. Always great to have you on.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah, it's wonderful to have you on again because you're such an expert on Dutch football and especially having an English voice as well. There aren't many out there that know their Dutch football. So a lot of games were postponed this weekend due to the storm that hit the Netherlands. But one of the games that still went ahead and was quite a big one in the fixture list was PSV 3, Willem II 0. Significant for many reasons. For PSV, of course, who are going through all these struggles, winning perhaps 1 in 4 games, an awful run. Ernest Faber struggling a lot to, for me at least, tactically get this PSV team right. But they came out on top against a very young, pacey Willem II side. And for me, Jonathan, I thought that PSV were tactically well set up. I thought that they were playing very deep. Willem II couldn't get their pacey men in behind the PSV defence, which is normally quite slow. But I thought that the back line had a great game for PSV, and I think Faber got his tactics right. First time I think I can say that since he took over as manager from Mark van Bommel. But do you think it was a particularly good day for PSV or a particularly weak one for Willem II?
I think it was a surprise that the likes of Nunnally and Kohler, the 2 wingers for Willem II, didn't get the upper hand as much as they might have expected to against Dumfries and Rodriguez. You know, first start for him. The new left back, they tried very hard to get Patrick van Aanholt back to the Netherlands from Crystal Palace and weren't able to. So they brought Rodriguez in, who's really experienced but hasn't played so much at AC Milan. And I was surprised really that they weren't able to score at all. And only an own goal really right in the stoppage time to round things off really. But they've been so strong, Willem II. They've been, everyone's reported, one of the surprises of the season. Really, you know, in that mix for an automatic Europa League slot. And when you look at the team, it's very settled. It's been the same few players. And for once, maybe PSV did get things right. You know, they had Hendricks and Rosario together as a decent 2 in midfield. Ryan Thomas playing in a more advanced role. That's where they seem to see him there at PSV rather than a winger, which he was more a Pexvoller. So, yeah, it's nice to see him getting a goal after such a long time out and then coming back and being sent off and really not being such a key part of that PSV midfield. Sam Lammers really is the one that I think he could do with a goal or two really to get going. He's, you know, come back after another long injury layoff and he just hasn't been able to get that goal. Starting again and playing 90 minutes. I think once he gets up and running, you know, PSV really could do with him scoring with Donny Marlon out for so long. Then they've lost Steven Bergwijn, which I'm sure we'll touch on a little bit later as well. So they're not really full of goals. So they get 3 goals, one from a fullback and one from Thomas, and then an own goal was pretty good really. And Ernest Faber can hopefully feel a little bit better about himself, and they've closed the gap to Willem II now to just a point.
Yeah, Denzel Dumfries you mentioned there is new captain of PSV. For me, to start with, didn't stand out for his leadership skills, but I think he's certainly been leading by example by his recent performances. He's come up with some important goals as well, which has been helpful for them. You mentioned Steven Bergwijn there. I think it's a good time to talk about him now. We're going to talk about the Netherlands a little bit later, Dutch national team, and where Bergwijn can fit in there. But has he been missing for PSV? Has that been an obvious miss already since he left for Tottenham Hotspur?
Well, he's certainly been a boost for Tottenham Hotspur, no doubt about that, scoring on his debut. It's very difficult to replace him. They've got Gakpo, who's playing on one side, but, you know, Hatteren isn't really a wide player, you know, not in the same vein as Bergwijn. And you look at the potential options they've got as a wide man. Doan was possibly one of the more obvious. And Bruma didn't even get off the bench. He would be the most obvious really to start. It's surprising really that maybe it was more of a defensive move for Faber to play that kind of role for Hatteren rather than the number 10 role and Thomas. I think Bergwijn, his goals and his influence on the team, even though he's only very, very young still, it's going to be difficult to replace him over the course of the second half of the season. And he was so key when they were tracing down Ajax last season, and they really missed him. The real dip for PSV began when him and Marlon were injured, didn't it? So it just showed that was the first real wobble after a start of the season where both Ajax and PSV had looked like making it another really good battle for the title. So yes, I think Spurs are going to see the best of him, and I think he will be a huge part of the Netherlands squad going forward. But I think PSV are going to miss him. It's inevitable.
Do you think he's going to do well with Spurs? I mean, a goal in your debut is always great, and many people can suddenly think, wow, he's going to be amazing. But do you see him fitting into English football?
I think so. He's really strong. If he can keep fit, that's the key thing. He's had a couple of things this season which have knocked him back, and he hasn't played as many games as maybe you would have expected to in the first half of the campaign. But yeah, I think he's fast. He's strong. We saw Memphis Depay move to England very, very quickly. Louis van Gaal, paid to get him ahead of Paris Saint-Germain when he was at Manchester United, and it really surprised me that he didn't fit in as well as many people expected him to with the money that they paid for him. Bergwijn, similar kind of player. I think he's maybe, if anything, got a little bit better chance. He hasn't gone straight to one of the biggest clubs in England. He's gone to Spurs, who are rebuilding really after overachieving, maybe many would say last season, reaching the Champions League final. So I think the expectations are not quite as high as they were for Memphis when he came to England. I think he's got a good chance of doing really well.
But speaking of Memphis Depay, he's out injured at the moment, and with the injury that he sustained, you'd think that he'd be out for the rest of the season, out for the Euros. And on the Football-Oranje podcast, just to catch you up a little bit, Jonathan, we've been speaking a little bit about how he has been posting videos on social media as he attempts to make some sort of miraculous comeback. I don't know if he's going to make it, and no word has been said yet by the player, an agent or whatever, or a Lyon manager that he's going to make it by a certain date. But I think the way that Depay is posting all these videos, it's there to suggest that he's trying really hard to make it back as soon as possible. This guy shouldn't be sprinting, 7 weeks after. I do believe it was his cruciate ligaments that were harmed, and yeah, he's making a comeback. And for me, at least, I'm hoping that he can make it back in time for the Netherlands' Euro 2020 matches, because he's played such a crucial role in how the Netherlands play.
It would be amazing, really. It really would be amazing if he makes it. For all intents and purposes, it sounded like he was, there was no chance at all. But he seems very, very optimistic. So I'm really not 100% sure. I have to say, I'm really not 100% sure whether it's wise or whether it's whether he's on track. But remember, he's got the best care, he's got the best medical attention. So whatever happens, then he'll be monitored every step of the way.
I was one of the few Netherlands questions that were sent in to us this week via Twitter. As usual, thank you for sending in your questions to us, listeners, and if you have any in future, send them through on a mixture of platforms. Usually we post them on Twitter though, so you can send us your questions. One of them was from Abdul, and he was asking who should the forward line be for the Netherlands against USA, with Promes, Depay and Marlon out injured. Now, I don't know about you, Jonathan, but I haven't heard yet how long Promes is out for.
No, not 100%. They're hoping it isn't too long. He pulled up, didn't he, with that back heel trying to set up Babel in the last game. Initially, they were hopeful that he'd be back for the Europa League games against Getafe, but we'll have to wait and see, because if it's a hamstring, even a mild grade of a hamstring tear, then it's usually a lot longer than that. And they're in action on the 20th in the first leg. So it'll be touch and go, I think, whether he's back for that one.
And then to say for the matches in March, when the Dutch play USA, and I don't, well, the Depay and Marlon are definitely out. And again, just a bit of history for this. We've been talking a little bit on the podcast about who should be taken over as the striker in the absence of Marlon and Depay. And Luuk de Jong has been someone who Koeman likes to play off the bench, usually as a pinch hitter. But could he be starting matches is another question. And I think in March, Koeman's got a bit of a choice between someone who he knows and trusts, like Luuk de Jong. He could even bring Wout Weghorst in from the Bundesliga, or to try and keep the same stuff that he's been using before with Depay through the middle, or Marlon. He might choose to do someone like Myron Boadu, for example, the AZ striker, 13 Eredivisie goals so far this season. And we've been really talking him up because we think that he's the answer long term for the Netherlands. And in terms of a front three against the USA, for me, I think that Koeman should be playing Boadu. As for what I think Koeman will pick, though, it's very different. I think Koeman's going to go with Luuk de Jong for the middle, with Babel and Bergwijn flanking either side. Whereas I'd like to see something more like Boadu playing for the middle and Calvin Stengs playing out wide and Steven Bergwijn, who has experience of Spurs under his belt by then. I don't think Koeman's going to go with a young and vibrant lineup though, because I think he just wants to get a lineup out that he knows will play in June.
Yeah, he does like Ryan Babel as well. You know, there was a bit of a surprise when he came back to Ajax again as cover, with Neres, still struggling with injury, and an option, a decent option, an experienced option, wide on that left-hand side. Didn't really fit with Ajax's usual transfers, but they know what they're getting. A player who's been there twice before, and he's there till the summer. I would go with Boadu myself, to be honest. He's proven at Eredivisie level he could do it, and in Europe as well. He scored on his under-21 debut, and it didn't take him long to make a full national debut and score on that as well. So I don't think he can lose anything, really, by trying him out. He needs to see him a little bit more if he is going to be part of the squad and anything more than just a late impact substitute. So my choice, really, would be to go with Boadu down the middle. He knows what de Jong can provide. He doesn't need to see him too much. It's a free hit in terms of selection. I think we might see a few interesting players coming in and maybe staking a late claim.
Yeah, things could change yet again. One only has to look at what Matthijs de Ligt did and became a regular overnight for Ajax and the Netherlands. So just, anything could happen still. So long to go before the tournament. Now, we were talking about PSV and their match against Willem II, and then we kind of went a little bit of a tangent towards the Netherlands national team. So let's go full circle and back to PSV. One of the questions we had was from Vlad. Is there any news on a new PSV manager for next season? I've only seen rumours for Roger Smit so far, who I think would be ideal. I have to say, Vlad, I haven't seen rumours towards Roger Smit. I know that he was linked with Ajax at one point. But yeah, I believe that the rumours are true. Perhaps he could be in the frame. But the latest I heard was that Ernest Faber could be given a contract for next season if he can sustain results for another month or so. And we could be seeing Ernest Faber continuing as PSV manager, which I don't think many PSV fans will be that excited with.
No, I mean, they know him as an assistant to Koku, don't they? And then he went and tried his own hand at Groningen. It didn't really work out for him. And then he's come back to be behind the scenes in the academy. So he's a safe pair of hands, I think, as far as they're concerned. But there's been no real noise coming out of the club on that score. And I don't know, had Marcel Brands still been there, then maybe we might have had a few names sort of drip fed in. It's interesting because we just don't know. They're happy for him to steady the ship and keep it going until the end of the season. And I don't know what the expectations are, really. The PSV expectations seem to be top two season after season. But the way things are for them at the moment, it's going to be difficult to close that 7-point gap on our 8-point gap on RZ, really, the way things are going. So I think an automatic Europa League slot is possibly the best they can hope for, unless things really do go to pot with RZ in the last few games of the season. I'm as intrigued as anybody, really, because there just haven't been, surprisingly, when we're in February, that many names in the frame. I
can only imagine that the club are just waiting to see whether Faber can be a success or not, and then they'll just play that little waiting game. I don't know. It's good to see that they got a result against Willem II, and maybe they'll start to think more positively towards Faber and the future. And that's maybe why we've been hearing links that he'll get an extended contract. But yeah, I think we'll just keep our ears to the ground and see what else we hear. So yeah, Vlad, I'm not really sure at the minute who else it'll be. Jonathan, I'd like to ask you, considering we've got you on the podcast, what do you think the top four is going to be this season? Do you think AZ are going to sustain how well they've been doing? Do you think Ajax are going to come back strong and clinch a title? Or do you think it's going to be a fantastic season for Feyenoord or Willem II? Who do you think that's going to be the top four?
Well, if you'd asked me while Leonid Slutsky was still in charge at Vitesse, I would have probably put them in. The way they started the season, they were unbelievably good. Big things expected of John van den Brom when he came to Utrecht, but they have blown hot and cold, and at the moment they're in the middle of a cold spell, really. And they've got Ajax to contend with when that game's rescheduled. I think it won't be too far off what we see at the moment. Ajax and AZ, it's going to be interesting to see when they play. I'm doing the game on the 1st of March when they play each other, which should be a fantastic game after AZ won the first one. Feyenoord under De Cavacar have been fantastic, and I'd expect them to sustain that. And then it really comes down to whether PSV can get their act together or whether Willem II can sustain what's been an incredible season already, a record-breaking one, and maybe sneak into Europe on that. I would probably be tempted to go with the big three plus AZ. So Ajax as title winners, AZ to hold on for second, Feyenoord third, and then PSV to take fourth. I don't know how you see it.
Well, I think Ajax are going to be winning the title. I don't think AZ can sustain win after win, and Ajax will eventually get some players back. They've got some really tricky fixtures the next month or so, Ajax, and then pretty much after the AZ match, so long as they've played Utrecht, by the time that's happened, then I think it's a fairly straightforward run. So if we're thinking about AZ being top of the table by then, I think Ajax will take back over. So we could see a little twist in the tail, but it should be Ajax for first. And then I think it's between AZ and Feyenoord for second, because Dick Advocaat spoke about him on the last podcast, that he has just got Feyenoord turning into this winning machine. But whether or not they have the quality to go away from home and win lots of matches is another question. I think AZ have got the form to win a lot of games still in the league. I think they're quickly going to be knocked out of Europe. They might get past Lask in the last 32, but I think they'll meet someone a lot more tricky in the last 16. But yeah, I think that Feyenoord will run AZ close and then finish third themselves. So it ends up being the same prediction that you just made there, Jonathan. But yeah, with PSV winning against Willem II, I think that I can now safely say that they'll be at least fourth place or higher, because for a long time it's looking like they're going to fall down further down the table.
I know it's remarkable that to see them, clinging on to fourth place when really they've been either title winners or second in so many of the last few seasons. It's funny. It's not quite a changing of the guard. I would say it's just a blip, particularly as they did so well under Van Bommel last season. But it's really incredible. It's nice to see the things opening up and AZ, particularly under Arne Slot, his first managerial role, doing so well. But it is a surprise to see PSV where they are and to see them, only just nipping at the heels of Willem II for fourth place.
Yeah, sure. I just think that this summer, if PSV want to make a comeback, they've probably only got one more summer where they can spend good money until the Champions League money that they've accrued over the last few years will run out. And then you are actually looking at a potential changing of the guard. I also think that their top performers haven't been doing so well. For example, Jeroen Zut, who's been the goalkeeper for so long and was always going to be someone they'd sell for a lot of money, decided to stay at the club, and now he's perhaps going a little bit stale. And yeah, of course, he's on loan at Utrecht now for the rest of the season. Dumfries, he's done well and is a very good player, but isn't becoming a great player. So you're seeing a lot of players now either reaching their peak at PSV, and it looks like that might be their level, or players going over their peak and going a little bit stale, which is a shame, because then you are seeing Ajax run away with the title quite easily. It would be nice to see AZ finish second, Champions League, get some Champions League money into their club, and then all of a sudden the top three becomes the top four, and then it will be a very interesting season upon season with all the money that's injected into that club. So yeah, we've talked plenty about the top of the table, Jonathan, and one of the things that's intriguing a lot of international Dutch football fans across the world is Alan Pardew at ADO Den Haag, and we haven't spoken much about him on the Football-Oranje podcast. We mentioned him briefly when he first joined. We haven't really analysed yet how he's actually been achieving with the club so far. So, it all started with a good win of RKC Waalwijk, which was followed up by an absolute drubbing at Utrecht. Then a draw with Vitesse, and the match of Sparta's coming up. If you listen to this podcast after the match, I wonder how they got on. But Pardew's done okay, hasn't he? He's brought in a lot of players, but I'm not sure if it's going to be enough because, of course, the bottom two in the Eredivisie now get directly relegated. Are Pardew's Den Haag in big trouble still?
I think so. It's taking him a while to find out about his squad, and of course now he's got to find out about 9 new players, because he's brought in players who he feels are more suited to saving them from the drop, who are a little bit more experienced. He's let Milan van Ewijk go out on loan, who was one of their more impressive youngsters, and he's trying to put his faith in players who won't maybe or will be more durable perhaps than he feels the youngsters, and maybe he doesn't want them to have a relegation on their CV or a relegation battle or whatever the reason. He's certainly put his faith in an awful lot of loan players who have come in, and they're going to have to get up to speed very, very quickly. They're 4 points behind VVV, 5 from safety altogether. I mean, it's a good point on the last game at home to Vitesse. He felt they looked more like a team who knew what they were doing, knew the game plan. They had to win that game against RKC, but really away at Utrecht, they really didn't look the part at all. And he called them naive. He felt they made mistakes and gave the ball away in very dangerous areas. It was not a performance that he was particularly happy with, and that left him with a week really to work in the market and try and bring new players in. So the likes of Duffy and Omar Bogle have come in late on deadline day, and he's got to mould them into a team pretty quickly, because PSV are coming up, and Heerenveen, who've got their own European ambitions, and Heracles, who on their date have proven they can beat most sides this division. And then we start to get into March, and they've got to go to RZ. So it's certainly not easy at all. Sparta is a game they definitely need to win.
That's a big statement. It's, for me, that game against Utrecht kind of said how poor in quality this ADO team is. He's added a lot of players to it, but I still don't know if the level's actually got any better. Are they actually better than VVV Venlo? Are they actually better than, say, an Emmen or a Sparta? I don't think so. And that's why I think that they're going to be in huge, huge trouble. I actually predict them to finish 16th. Very well. Not the start of the season, I have to say. No, I actually can't remember why I put them at the start of the season, but I'd never had great faith in them because I knew that they hadn't been spending a lot of money. They've been missing El Kayati since he left in the summer, who was doing a lot of the goal scoring for them and getting out of tricky situations. They don't have that anymore. It's just a really poor watch whenever you decide to watch ADO Den Haag, and now Pardew's in charge. He's trying to make them more robust, and it's making them even more painful to watch.
Yeah, they're a side that need to be stronger at the back, and they showed against Vitesse they could be, but they're not. You look at the regular back four. Bergelsteig has been around a long time, and he's not that reliable. He picks up a lot of cautions. He's suspect when it comes to pace. Myers is useful on the flanks, particularly going forward. And Pines as a centre half partner, it's very difficult. And Stubbs has come in now and looked a little bit more secure, the youngster, but it's very, very difficult. They leak goals. They struggle to score goals. They've still got the likes of Erik Falkenberg, who is just about the most much-travelled player in the entire Eredivisie, who seems to have played for everybody, and yet never really scores too many goals wherever he goes. So it's the Netsid has done well to get 6 in a team that doesn't score very many. But if you take his 6 goals out of it, there really aren't too many other players scoring goals. Kramer's got a couple, mostly off the bench, and Gosens has got one of the goals of the season so far. But apart from that, he's not been able to inspire them and isn't really in the kind of form that he was when he was playing for Feyenoord. So it's a strange mix of young players, inexperienced players, and players who've now come in on loan who aren't really familiar with the Eredivisie, but are being asked to get up to speed really, really quickly. It's an interesting decision for Alan Pardew, who I'm sure did his due diligence and his homework before he came over. he's got Chris Powell along with him, who's another experienced coach. So if they can turn it around, it'll be interesting to see if he sticks around. Maybe he'll want to try and take 2 or 3 years to build them up into something. They overachieved under Fons Groenendijk last season. It just shows what a great job he did, and what a great job El Kayati did in midfield as well.
Yeah. I spoke recently on Love Sport Radio, and I said that I think Pardew will leave at the end of the season. No matter what happens, if he succeeds, I think Chris Powell will be the successor, and he'll take over the reins. But I think if he fails and they get relegated, then Ardo are not going to be able to afford Pardew nor Powell. So I think that the English interest will be there if they do stay up. And I hope they do, because Ardo are a bigger club in the country. And it's never fair to say that, because no one deserves to stay up just because of how big they are. But it is nice when the Eredivisie has the biggest clubs in it. It was nice to see FC Twente back. I know that some Netherlands Eredivisie fans would have actually said, no, it's not because Twente deserved it, all the money they spent, they shouldn't have done. And Twente are actually one of the most hated clubs in the Netherlands, alongside Ajax. So I don't know, but from an international supporters' point of view, from a neutral point of view, it is nice to have big clubs in the top division. At least that's what it's like for me.
Yeah, they're a popular side over there. They bring fans, supporters. It's always passionate, particularly when the bigger clubs go there and try and play. I mean, it's a funny club behind the scenes. They're never short of a drama. With the owners or with the supervisory board, there is always something going on. They always provide good stories and good talking points, and I'm sure Alan Pardew is finding out a little bit more about how the club is run and things going on behind the scenes. But it was a very big surprise when he went over there. A club who do have the Chinese backers, but never have really seemed to have had the money that was promised, and the investment that was hoped for by the fans to make them a regular mid-table side. They are not replacing El Kayati, and looks to be the biggest problem, really.
Yeah, I agree with you. Now, we're running out of time, Jonathan. We've got a few things still left to cover. So I'm going to give you a couple of Twitter questions. I don't think we'll have time for them all, considering a couple of them appear to be final related, and we've kind of already covered those. One is about Pazvan Marin. It's a question from Elder Pigeon. He said, what's going on with Pazvan Marin? Good player and solid experience in Belgium, 23 years old, complete midfielder. The fit looked good with Ajax. How do you explain that bust? Thanks, guys. Podcasts are always interesting. Well, thank you for that. But yeah, Marin has not really fit into Ajax. And at first, when he came to the club from Belgium, he said that he felt like he was getting a bit overawed by the whole club and the atmosphere of it. The sheer size of it. He still hasn't settled, has he?
No, I mean, he started the first 3 games, and then he was out for a bit, and he's had one start really since the end of September, and that was in the defeat at RZ. I think off the ball, positionally, he just had a lot more to learn than I think people expected, first of all, to fit into that Ajax midfield and the way they play, not just with the ball, but without the ball. It's very prescriptive. The positions that players need to take up. And I think it took him a little while longer than people expected to slot into that. The likes of Van der Beek, who've come through the academy and played that way for so long, instinctively seem to know where to be. Frenkie was exactly the same when he was at the club. So many people thought he was, the ready-made replacement for Frenkie de Jong. And then we saw Daley Blind start the season in midfield, and Marin a little bit further ahead. He's done okay. He's got a good eye for goal. He's come close on a few times, not yet found the net in the Eredivisie. I just think discipline-wise, when he loses the ball, and he lost it a little too often for Erik ten Hag's liking, he didn't have the discipline to get back and play that midfield role that they were hoping that he would play. So, yeah, I mean, he's found himself behind Siem de Jong in the last couple of games, which has been a bit of a surprise to him, I'm sure, as it was to everybody else. It'll just take him a little bit of time, if they're prepared to put that time in, for him to properly learn that role. We saw Edson Alvarez come in, and he looked like he would maybe be that successful central midfielder, particularly in Europe, when they put him in there alongside Lisandro Martinez. But again, he's fallen out in the last few games, and Ryan Gravenberch has been the more attacking player to play that role with Van der Beek, a little bit deeper. So with Marin, I think it'll be a reassessment at the end of the season. You know, it might be that they decide to persevere, and if they see the good signs that he's learning and he's can play the role they hope he can play, then he'll stick around. If not, then they're not short of midfielders in that area now. You know, players coming through, so it might not be that much of a surprise if he doesn't get much action between now and the end of the season. If they move him on potentially on loan.
Yeah, it'd be a shame to see him leave, but I think he's gonna maybe leave at the end of the season just because there's lack of opportunities for him, and I don't think it's going to change around anytime soon. I don't think he's going to be Ajax level. Another question from S_Van Den, or S_VDH as he's now called. Something about Robin Gosens, and he said he doesn't know where he'd fit into the Netherlands squad or who he'd take minutes from. And he also doesn't know much about him. Do we know much about him? Well, Jonathan, we watched him for a long time, didn't we, play in the Eredivisie for Heracles?
Yeah, and he always looked useful. I don't think he was one of those players that you'd look at and think he would make the impact he has done in Serie A. But then I suppose you would say Atalanta were a side in the same vein. You know, you wouldn't think that they would potentially make the same impact as they actually made and qualify, you know, for the Champions League. So he probably fits their style and their outlook, really. And he's been a useful player. I've only seen him once or twice in the Champions League, I have to say. I'm no expert on how he's played in Italy. But I am surprised that he has played quite as regularly as he has done. 19 starts for him and 20 Serie A appearances. 7 goals too. So he's a player who has blossomed since leaving Heracles. And he's a good example, really, of the way Heracles picked players up. He had time at Dordrecht when he was at Vitesse and never really made the breakthrough there. And Heracles picked him up from Vitesse. And their scouting, particularly of German players, has been really, really good with Frank Wormuth in charge, Heracles. And he's one of those that's gone on to do really, really good things.
Well, for me, I think Gosens is someone who fits into a back five. I think at Atalanta he plays left wing back. And with the Netherlands, they're looking for someone who's maybe a bit more solid. And Daley Blind's that kind of person at the minute. And if Blind is fit, and fingers crossed he has no more problems with his heart, he plays well for Ajax this season. And he gets selected for the Euro squad. He had a lot of negative attention, Blint, when he played with the Netherlands, especially playing the left-back role, which isn't his favourite position. But he does well again now. Koeman's found a way of getting the best out of him, playing left-back position, and for a long time, Patrick van Aanholt's been a backup. So I don't know where Gosens will fit in. He'd have to be third choice, and if one of them is injured, you never know, he might be selected. The likes of Konkolo, for example, he will not be in the Euro squad, that's for sure, on loan at Fulham at the minute. So yeah, he could be an option if there are injuries. Or unless he keeps his fine form, and then you never know, he might be selected over Van Aanholt, for example. But I'm getting the impression already that Koeman isn't someone who's going to be taking risks for his Euro 2020 squad. No,
and I would say that the first point you made is probably the more telling. You know, there are an awful lot of players in different leagues who play in a three at the back and have done for a long, long time, and that role as a wing back, it differs. You know, the role as a even as a left or right sided centre half differs from the centre half role that you'll need in a back four. So that might just be him missing out as a wing back, really, because he's not a traditional left back.
Sure. So yeah, he may well be missing out, but a good player to raise nonetheless. Another question. Oh no, I think we're going to run out of time. But there is something that I would like to ask you, Jonathan, and that is about who you think have been your 3 standout players this season in the Eredivisie. Because there's so many players we can choose from. We could choose the Hakim Ziyech of the division, but I think let's go some curveballs. So there's some younger players in our lists. Jonathan, we selected 3 each, and as it happened, we didn't choose the same players. So plenty to talk about. Let's have your 3 first.
Well, I've got the first one is I suppose is obvious in a way because he's the league's leading scorer at the moment, but the fact that he is far from obvious. Cyril Dessers. He's had a standout season in a Heracles side who began pretty well but have dropped off a little bit. But to score 14 goals so far after how many games have Heracles played? 22. A side that sit exactly mid-table is a fantastic achievement from a player who did it in the second division with NAC Breda and never really was able to make that step up when he went to Utrecht and hasn't found the number of goals so far up to this season, but has really gone to town. And Heracles, let's not forget, lost their front three last season, a really productive front three. Peterson and Dalmau and Kuvas. So to step in and score that same number of goals and put himself ahead of everyone from Ajax and PSV and RZ has been a brilliant achievement from Cyril Dessers. I could have picked any of the front three from RZ, really, as another one. I'm going to go with Calvin Stengs, just because he's looked fantastic, whether he's played wide right or he's played in the number 10 role. And he's run games when he's played as a 10, particularly in the Europa League. He's looked fantastic, and he may not have got as many goals as Idrissi or Pardew, but he's provided an awful lot of them. And if he hasn't provided the actual assist, then he's been the one that's made the break or the telling pass in the move to create it. So I'm going to go with Calvin Stengs. And my third is a player from another surprise team, Willem II, and it would be difficult of me really not to pick a Willem II player, given how surprising and impressive they've been. And I'm going to go with their young Belgian. Some people call him Mike Tresor, some people Dijsselmeer, if they can pronounce it. But he's been fantastic on loan from NEC, and they've made that permanent in the second half of the season for only €500,000, which is brilliant. He's only scored 4 goals, but he's been such a key player, again with assists in midfield, and really a real find. Plenty of clubs were interested in him in January. Plenty, I'm sure, if he keeps it up, will be interested in him in the summer. So he's my third pick, a player who has been at the heart of Willem II's fantastic first half of the season.
I'm very envious of your pronunciation of Mike Tresor and Dijsselmeer. I think that's probably the best way of saying it. I've ever said it before, but you've got it far better than I have. Willem II got some great players this season. And I think you could look at their centre-back partnership, Holman and Peters. You could look at their forward players. Pavlidis has been great as a striker. He's 10 Eredivisie goals, I believe, flanked by Nunnally and Colert. But it's hard to pick out standout players in that team, isn't it? And I think Mike Tresor is probably the one that you could say, or him or Pavlidis, the one you could say, yeah, that is a standout player in that team. Yeah. I think it's also easy to pick RZ players, though. I think you can pick the individual qualities of those RZ players and say they make a difference to that team, and without them, they'd find it hard to play. And for me, Myron Boadu, he has to be in my top 3. Mainly because I feel like I've got to celebrate how well he can play. When he broke through, I even watched him live in the stadium and tried to get more of his game. And I just felt that he wasn't doing enough off the ball when he was only 17 years of age. And I also thought that he was just someone who would use his pace and didn't really have a good finish on him. How wrong I was. And I'm so pleased that he's succeeding. Because when he was 14, 15, everyone was sort of talking about him coming through the youth ranks, whether that was for RZ or the Netherlands. And when he came to senior football, he just looked a little bit one-dimensional for me. But I think that was purely because he was recovering from a really horrible long-term injury and had to try and get back the best parts of his game, the all-round game that he has. And I've just been so impressed with him. I think that goal he scored against EKC Volwijk, despite the fact that it was the league's lowest club, when Svensson played a low ball in and he just switched from the right foot to left foot to put that into the bottom corner. I thought that was exceptional, just how quickly he could do that. But it's not as well as that. He's someone who links at the play. He's becoming a bit of a target man as well, and really feeds into Idrissi on the left-hand side. And I think we're going to come into that left-hand side in just a moment for another RZ player. But yeah, Boadu for me, exceptional. And I'm really, really interested to see what happens with him this summer. Whether he plays at the Euros, whether he makes a transfer, or whether he just stays at RZ and wants more. And has a really good season with them, potentially in the Champions League. But it could also be, if RZ can keep this team together, pushing for a title, but more in earnest this time, rather than this season where they're a bit more of a surprise package. So I'm just really intrigued to see what happens next with RZ, and in particular, Boadu.
He's been fantastic. I really loved watching him. And you're right about the injury, because he and Stengs have both had potentially career-ending injuries, and they've both come back to play, incredible football. And we didn't see them together for such a long time. Stengs got injured, and then Boadu came in, and then he got injured. It was so sad to see, because they were both serious injuries that took them out for a year. So to see them both playing at the top of their game and both getting Dutch call-ups and making debuts is exceptional, and in what has been an exceptional season for their team.
And he's not the only player that I picked for my top 3 as well. As we stick with RZ, Owen Wijndal at left back. How he can take over from Overjan to become the regular left back, it was a surprise to me because I didn't think that would be the case. I thought Overjan would have to leave for that to happen. But no, Wijndal has actually been an improvement in that position. And he just links up really well with Idrissi on the left-hand side. They're really dangerous together. But also defensively, I don't think I've seen many weaknesses in his game yet. So another one as well, who we talked about the left-back position for the Netherlands. I think he's going to be the left-back in the national team in 5 years' time, say. So I'll stop talking about RZ because I've also got a third player on the list. Another fullback, Serginho Dest, who I had to talk to Jonathan before the podcast, didn't I, Jonathan, about actually when did he first break into the Ajax team, and it was only this season. The Super Cup was his first breakthrough appearance for this Ajax side, and it feels like he's been out for like a couple of years. The way he's just fit in, he's not the perfect player yet, of course, and it is a shame we didn't choose the Netherlands to be his national team he represents. He's going to be playing for the USA, but he's a fullback who bombs on a lot, very direct player, can score a goal as well, but also someone that does a lot of the dirty work in defence. And I think that right back is now going to be his position. It's good that he's flexible, but I think that he's not a winger. I do think he is a fullback. Similar to that really modern fullback that everyone just keeps talking about nowadays. Wijndal and Dest are 2 very good examples of that.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Mazraoui was never really a fullback when he came through. He played in midfield and he was only latterly put in at fullback. Has done a great job, but he's been, as you saw in home and in Europe, he was moved around. He played in a more defensive midfield role when it required a bit of movement in there, when there was playing a team that was a little bit more mobile. So I think Dest is a more natural fullback, and it could be difficult now for Mazraoui to play on a regular basis. Dest seems to have nailed that one down. Mazraoui at the moment has had a couple of injuries in the early half of the season, but is now having to wait for his turn on the bench. So, yeah, I think we'll see a lot more from Dest in the second half of the season.
Agreed. Jonathan, thank you so much for joining me on this Football-Oranje podcast, and again, really hope to have you back in future.
Thank you very much for having me. Cheers.
And thank you, listeners, for joining us on this podcast. There'll be another one soon, I'm sure. Plenty more to come on the Football-Oranje website. Always keep in touch there. There's a competition coming up soon if you are someone who lives in the UK or Ireland. Keep listening to Football-Oranje and keep following the Eredivisie and the Dutch national team. Thanks for listening. See you soon.
Dennis Bergkamp! Dennis Bergkamp!
Daar is hij, ja!
Daar is hij, ja!
Daar is Klaassen, goal!